I'm Rachel Morgan, 31 years old, and I stood at the edge of the ballroom at my sister's wedding unnoticed for a moment longer than I expected. The last time anyone in this room had seen me, I was 17 and quietly leaving the only home I'd ever known. A decade had passed since then, 10 years since my family wrote me off as the awkward one who didn't belong. Now, here I was standing taller, dressed in emerald silk, and watching Heather's new husband try to place who I was. When my mother finally recognized me, the look on her face stopped the conversation cold. She didn't say a word, but the silence said everything. Before I tell you how that moment unraveled and what came after, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from. And if you've ever returned to a place that once broke, you hit that like and subscribe button, you're not alone. I was raised in Fairfield County, Connecticut, in one of those towns where every front lawn looks like it's been trimmed with nail scissors, and the mailboxes match the shutters. My parents, Catherine and Stephen Morgan, believed in two things: appearances and reputation. My father worked in finance. My mother ran committees, hosted fundraisers, and kept up with every name that mattered. From the outside, we looked like the picture of success. Inside, it was a different story. My sister Heather was the golden one. Blonde, slender, always smiling in a way that made other people smile back. She was the kind of girl who won homecoming queen without campaigning and got into Ivy League schools before Christmas break. Teachers adored her. Neighbors remembered her birthday. My mother liked to say she was born for the spotlight. Then there was me. I had a rounder face and braces that lasted longer than anyone else's, glasses that constantly slid down my nose. My hair was always one step away from a frizz, and the acne, it came in waves so relentless I eventually stopped trying to hide it. I kept to myself mostly. I was quiet, better at listening than talking. Books were easier than people. Coding, especially something about it, just made sense when nothing else did. But at home, none of that mattered. "Rachel, try sitting up straighter like your sister," my mother would say at the dinner table, dabbing her lips with a cloth napkin. "And do something with that hair. People remember how you look before they remember what you say." I wasn't angry about it, not back then. I just accepted that in our family, beauty and charm opened doors. Logic and focus stayed upstairs with the door shut. The only one who ever saw me clearly was my grandmother, Eleanor. She lived in a modest house up in Vermont, surrounded by pine trees and silence. I'd spend a few weeks there every summer, helping her with chores and tinkering with my old laptop on the porch. She asked about my projects. She listened. Really listened. "You've got something special in that head of yours," she told me once, holding my hand with a kind of quiet certainty. "The world may not see it now, but one day it will." That memory kept me going through the harder years. High school widened the gap between Heather and me. She drove a convertible and hosted bonfire parties. I rode the bus and wrote code late into the night. When I did win awards, math competitions, coding challenges, my parents offered polite claps, then turned the conversation back to Heather's prom dress or college visits. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need the recognition. But deep down, I think every kid wants their parents to see them, to be proud. The shift came slowly, but it hit hard. I got accepted into Stanford's computer science program. A partial scholarship. I still remember sitting at the dinner table, sliding the letter across to my dad, hoping maybe this time something would land. He glanced at it, then handed it back. "That's across the country," he said, barely lifting his glass. "It's not practical." "We've got to be smart about these things," my mother added. "Your sister's law school needs support too, and she has the network to make it pay off." I sat there, heart thudding in my chest, not sure if I'd misheard. But then my father said it the words that made everything crystal clear. "You're the plain one, Rachel. That's just the truth. This family invests where it counts." I didn't cry in front of them. I waited until my bedroom door was shut, and the noise of the dishwasher masked everything. The next morning, my grandmother called. "You come up here," she said. "I've got something for you." It was a cashier's check, $20,000. "My retirement fund," she said, "but this is more important." 2 days later, I left. No goodbye, no drama, just a note on the kitchen counter and a one-way train ticket west. I thought that was the end of it, the start of something new. But life has a way of looping back, especially when you least expect it. And years later it did, with an envelope in my mailbox, heavy cream cardstock, engraved in gold. That's when I knew my family hadn't forgotten me after all. They just remembered me differently. I opened the envelope 3 times before I really read what it said. Heather Morgan and Andrew James Thornton requesting the honor of my presence at their wedding. The ceremony would be held at the Westbrook Country Club, the same place where our parents used to host 4th of July parties when I was a kid. I sat there with the invitation in my lap, running my fingers over the heavy paper, wondering what made them remember I existed after all these years. That night, Jordan watched me from across the dinner table, his fork pausing in midair. "You're quiet," he said gently. "Is it the invitation?" I nodded, unsure how to begin. "I don't know if I should go," I said. "I don't even know why they sent it. If you do," he said, "I'll be right there with you. If you don't, I'll help you burn it." I smiled, but the weight didn't lift. The next morning, I made a call. Megan and James came by that evening with a bottle of wine and no shortage of opinions. Megan didn't even wait until her coat was off. "Absolutely not," she said, pacing in front of the fireplace. "That family tossed you aside like yesterday's paper. You owe them nothing." James was more measured. He sat across from me, hands folded in his lap. "What do you want, Rachel?" he asked. "Not what's right or polite. What feels right to you?" I didn't answer right away. I looked down at the invitation again. "I want to stop feeling like I was erased, like I never mattered." James nodded. "Then go. But go for your own peace of mind, not theirs." Later that night, I sat up in bed with my laptop open, reading through Andrew Thornton's business bio. He wasn't just some lawyer or hedge fund heir. He was the future face of Thornton Technologies, one of the largest data management firms on the East Coast. His father sat on the boards of 3 companies that overlapped with mine. It felt too deliberate to be coincidence. I turned to Jordan. "You think they invited me because of my company?" He didn't answer right away. Maybe he said, "But does that change why you'd go?" "No," I said quietly. "It doesn't." The RSVP deadline crept closer. I wrote out responses and deleted them. I said yes, then no, then nothing. And then one afternoon I opened my work inbox and saw a message from a name I hadn't typed in 10 years. From Heather Morgan. Subject, "Please come." It was short, just a few lines. "I hope this reaches you. It's Heather. Please come to my wedding. There's so much I want to say. Call me if you're willing to talk." There was a number, no apology, no mention of the past. At my next session, I handed the printed email to Dr. Bailey. "She sent it to my company address," I said. "Not my personal one." Dr. Bailey nodded slowly. "And that tells you that she wanted something from the CEO, not from the sister she abandoned." She didn't argue. So she asked, "What boundaries would you need to protect yourself if you choose to attend?" That question stuck with me all week. I made a mental list. What I'd say if they dismissed me again, how long I'd stay, what I'd do if someone crossed a line. Jordan and I practiced possible conversations like actors running lines. I even practiced how I'd respond to the kind of compliment that comes with a sting. "You look different," Jordan said in a mock voice, trying to sound like my mother. I smiled calmly and answered, "Seattle suits me." When I finally mailed back the RSVP, I felt a strange kind of calm. I added +1 next to my name and sealed the envelope before I could change my mind. I didn't call Heather. If she wanted to talk, she could do it in person. As the date approached, I focused on what I could control. I picked out a deep green silk dress with clean lines and a soft neckline. I had my hair trimmed and styled into soft waves. On the night before we left for New York, Jordan found me on the balcony watching the city lights stretch out past Elliott Bay. "You okay?" he asked, stepping behind me. "I think so," I said, folding my arms. "It feels different this time. I'm not going back to prove anything. I'm just going back." He rested his chin on my shoulder. "You've already won, no matter how the day goes." We landed at LaGuardia on a crisp Thursday afternoon and took a cab straight to the country club. Nothing about the place had changed. The hedges were still sculpted into perfect shapes. The stone facade still gleamed. It could have been 2005, if not for the woman I'd become walking through its doors. We arrived early ahead of the ceremony for the cocktail hour on the garden terrace. Waiters weaved between guests with trays of sparkling wine and tiny hors d'oeuvres. Everyone was dressed in soft pastels and summer suits. Women with names like Caroline and Bitsy exchanged air kisses and laughed like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. No one recognized me. A woman I vaguely remembered from childhood, Mrs. Ellison, leaned toward me and smiled. "Are you here for the groom's side or the bride's brides?" I said. "Oh," she looked confused. "I didn't know Heather had a cousin from out west." "I'm Rachel, her sister." Her smile faltered. Heather never mentioned a sister. Of course she hadn't. We wandered through the crowd, Jordan's hand resting gently at the small of my back. I caught glimpses of relatives I hadn't seen since high school. None of them seemed to notice me. Until I saw them, my parents standing near the golf course, railing champagne in hand, laughing with another couple. I walked toward them slowly. Jordan kept pace beside me. "Excuse me," I said softly. My mother turned, already smiling, until her eyes landed on me. There was a beat of silence. Then her face went pale. "Rachel." My father blinked like he was trying to place a familiar face in a crowd. "My God." I offered a polite smile. "It's good to see you both. This is my fiancé, Jordan Reed." Jordan shook their hands smoothly. "Congratulations on your daughter's wedding." My mother nodded automatically. "Thank you." Then her eyes flicked to the crowd. "Rachel," she said under her breath, "could we speak privately for a moment?" My father cleared his throat. "What are you doing here?" "I was invited," I said, pulling the ivory card from my purse. "By Heather." "You look—" He started, his voice trailing. "Different," I finished. "That happens after 10 years of hard work." "This isn't the time for this," my mother hissed. "Heather's day should be perfect." "I agree," I said evenly. "I'm just a guest. I'm not here to cause trouble." They didn't know what to say, so we walked away and I let them watch me go. Jordan leaned in close and whispered, "You handled that beautifully." The ceremony started shortly after. White roses lined the aisle and a string quartet played softly under the shade of the arbor. Heather was stunning, of course, her gown sleek and expensive, her hair swept into a low chignon. I sat in the middle rows, not up front with family. That seat wasn't mine anymore. But my presence, it was impossible to ignore. I was on my way back from the restroom when it happened. The hallway outside the ballroom was quiet, carpeted, lit with soft gold sconces. I turned the corner, and there she was, Heather, alone, walking toward me with her bouquet in one hand and the train of her gown trailing behind her like a silk cloud. Her steps slowed, then stopped. "Rachel." Her voice barely rose above a whisper, as if saying my name might change something about the day. "Hello, Heather," I said. "Congratulations." The ceremony was beautiful. She stared at me like I'd just stepped out of a photograph she'd buried in a drawer years ago. Her eyes moved from my face to my dress, taking everything in, but her expression didn't settle. "You really came," she said finally. "I wasn't sure you would. Your invitation was unexpected." She nodded slightly. There was a pause. Then she tried to smile. "You look amazing. Really different." I didn't respond to that. I let the silence speak for itself. "Life has a way of changing people," I said. Before she could say more, someone approached. A tall man in a sleek tuxedo with a warm smile and careful posture. "There you are, darling," he said, placing a hand on her waist. "Your mother's looking for you. Something about photos with your grandparents." He noticed me then, still standing there. "Oh, hello," he said politely. "This is Heather Started." I stepped forward. "Rachel Morgan," I said, offering my hand. "It's nice to meet you." The ceremony was lovely. He shook my hand with a firm grip. "Thank you. Do you know Heather?" There was a pause, just long enough to register. I looked at my sister and then back at him. "I'm her sister." His brow furrowed. "Heather always told me she was an only child." Heather's face went still. Color drained beneath her makeup. "Did she?" I said. "That's interesting." She cleared her throat. "Rachel and we've been estranged for many years. It's complicated." Andrew turned toward her, frowning. "I had no idea." "There's a lot you don't know," I said quietly. "But this is your wedding day. No need to get into it now." "No," he said, shaking his head slowly. "Actually, I'd like to understand." "Why didn't you tell me you had a sister?" Heather opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. "It's a long story," she said eventually. "My family and Rachel had a falling out. Years ago. It was painful. I didn't talk about it. A falling out," I repeated, not angry. "Just careful. Is that what we're calling it now?" More guests started moving through the hallway. There were soft murmurs and glances. Heather's husband didn't move. "What happened?" he asked. I took a breath. I was told I wasn't worth the investment, that I didn't fit the family, that I was the plain one. Heather flinched. "Andrew, please," she said. "Not here." But the moment had its own rhythm now. I grew up in that house being told I didn't belong. I continued. While Heather was praised for every step, I was constantly measured and found lacking. Andrew looked at her. "Is this true?" She looked down at her shoes. "You don't understand what it was like. I'm asking you now," he said. "Is it true I didn't know what to say?" Heather said. She always made it harder. She didn't want to be part of the things the rest of us cared about. She was different. I kept my voice steady, because I liked computers instead of cotillion. More people were nearby now. My mother appeared at the far end of the hallway, her smile already strained as she stepped into view. "What's going on here?" she asked, scanning the faces. Andrew turned toward her. "I just met your other daughter, the one I didn't know existed." The silence after that was louder than any voice. "I think we need a moment," Andrew said, guiding Heather and me toward the club's small library. The room smelled like old books and wood polish. Leather chairs surrounded a low glass table. He closed the door behind us. "Explain," he said again, looking between us. Heather's eyes darted around the room. "It's not like that. Rachel left. She didn't want to be part of the family anymore." "That's not true," I said calmly. "I left after your parents told me I wasn't worth sending to college, after years of being ignored, after being mocked at my sister's graduation party while she laughed along." Andrew looked at her. "You laughed at her." "She's exaggerating," Heather said quickly. "Am I?" I asked. "Did you not say I got the bad genes?" Heather didn't answer. The door creaked open. My father stepped inside with a tight smile. "Everything all right?" "No," Andrew said. Everything is not all right. He turned to my father. I just learned that Heather has a sister she never mentioned. A sister your family disowned. My father's expression twitched. Let's not bring up old disagreements on a day like today. Andrew's voice didn't rise, but it was firm. This isn't a disagreement. This is your daughter, and you erased her. At that moment, the door opened again. Jordan walked in with an older man, Andrew's father, I assumed. Distinguished, gray-haired. Watching carefully. "What's going on?" the older man asked. "I just met Rachel Morgan," Andrew said. "Heather's sister. She founded Sentinel Shield." The man turned toward me, his eyes sharpened. "You're the one behind the predictive threat algorithm, I am." My father's tone shifted instantly. "Rachel's done well for herself. We've been proud from a distance." Jordan spoke for the first time. "They didn't even contact her when her grandmother passed." My mother looked at me. "Was this your plan to ruin your sister's wedding?" "No," I said. "I came because I was invited." She studied me. "You've changed." "Yes," I said, "but I didn't become valuable because of my company. I always was. You just didn't see it." The room stayed quiet. Andrew took a deep breath and turned to his father. "We'll go back out, but this conversation isn't over." We filed out slowly. Heather kept her head down. My mother followed, whispering something I didn't catch. My father didn't look at me again. Back in the main room, the music played on. Jordan and I returned to our table. We stayed just long enough to be polite. Near the coat check, Heather caught up to me again. "You couldn't just let me have this day," she asked, her voice tight. "I didn't come to ruin anything I said. I came because you asked." She looked away. "He's angry with me. That's not my doing." Heather hesitated, then handed me something, my own business card folded with my personal number written on the back in my handwriting. "You said to call," she said. "If I was ready to be honest." I nodded. "Then maybe I will." As Jordan and I stepped out into the cool evening air, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The wedding had gone on. The lights were still twinkling behind us, but something had shifted. 3 days after the wedding, I was back in Seattle folding laundry in our apartment when my phone lit up with a Connecticut area code I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. "Rachel." Her voice was softer than I remembered. Smaller. "Heather," I said. I wanted to talk, like you said, really talk." I walked to the window, the city spread out below, and sat down with the phone pressed to my ear. "All right," I said. That first call didn't last long, just enough space to crack open something that had been shut tight for too long. She didn't apologize, not at first. Mostly she asked if I was still angry. I told her I wasn't sure angry was the right word. We talked again the next week, then the week after that. Sometimes she called late at night when she couldn't sleep. Sometimes I let it go to voicemail, but over time she began telling me things she never had before. About growing up with expectations she never felt strong enough to push against. About the pressure to be the version of herself everyone praised, no room for mistakes, no space for doubt. How marrying Andrew had felt like a continuation of the life our parents planned, even when she wasn't sure it was what she wanted. People always thought I had everything she said one night, her voice hushed like she was confessing in church. But I spent so much of my life trying to be what they needed. You never did that. And I used to think it made you difficult. But maybe it made you brave. I didn't say anything. I just listened. Heather told me that after the wedding, Andrew had insisted they start couples therapy. Not to assign blame, but to understand what kind of marriage they were building. It forced her to confront things she'd buried, choices she'd made, words she'd said. "I was jealous of you," she said quietly. "I saw how smart you were, how you never needed anyone's approval. I wished I could be like that. I stayed quiet for a moment, then said I would have traded every bit of it for someone in that house to say they were proud of me. There was a long silence. Then she said, "I know." I learned more in those conversations than I ever had as her sister. She told me about the night she cried in college because she didn't know who she was without an audience, about the panic she felt when she saw me at the wedding, about how she wanted to run and how she knew she couldn't. "I built my life on people thinking I had it together," she said, "and there you were, actually holding it together. It scared me. It wasn't easy and nothing got solved overnight, but something shifted, not backwards toward what we were, forward into something new." My parents were another story. A week after I got back, my mother called. "We should have dinner," she said without preamble, "next time you're in town." There was no reference to the wedding, no mention of what had happened. "Why now?" I asked. "Your company's making quite a name," she said. "Your father and I think it's time we reconnect." I paused. "Because I'm successful. We're proud of what you've built. That's not what I asked." She went quiet, just for a second, then said, "It's not helpful to dwell on old wounds. Accountability isn't dwelling." Another pause. "I'll think about it," I said. "But I need you to understand, if we're going to have any kind of relationship, it has to be on honest terms." She said she understood. I wasn't sure if she did. My father never called, not once. But I heard through Heather that he'd started following my company's press releases. He apparently had questions about our stock growth. That was as close as he ever came to acknowledging me. I made a decision to keep boundaries clear. I didn't block them out entirely, but I didn't open the door wide either. Heather was the only one I allowed into the deeper parts of my life. The rest stayed where they were. Work kept me busy. Sentinel Shield was expanding overseas. Our Boston office opened that fall. By spring, we had a team in London. Our predictive security platform had become an industry standard. At a cybersecurity conference in San Francisco, I gave a keynote on adaptive threat response. Afterward, 3 CEOs approached me for consultation. It felt surreal to be standing in that ballroom years after I'd served canapés at someone else's gala, now leading the conversation. But the most meaningful milestone came quietly away from cameras and press. 6 months after the wedding, I launched the Eleanor Morgan Foundation. It was named for the woman who gave me my first true chance. We offered scholarships to young women in STEM. But more than that, we built a mentorship program, pairing each recipient with a guide who would check in, offer advice, and simply listen when needed. The kind of presence I had found in my grandmother, and later in people like Professor Caldwell and Jordan. At the launch event in Seattle, Jordan squeezed my hand as we stood behind the stage curtain. "She'd be proud of you," he said. When I stepped out to speak, I saw a room full of girls, some confident, some unsure, all with that flicker of potential behind their eyes. "Success isn't about how others see you," I told them. "It's about what you choose to do with what's inside you, even when nobody's looking." They clapped, but I didn't need the applause. Later that night, I sat alone in the quiet, reading through thank you letters from the first cohort of recipients. Some written in careful penmanship, others typed and formatted like resumes. All of them real, all of them trying. I thought back to that moment in the country club hallway, Heather standing in her wedding dress, stunned by my presence, and how I'd said calmly, "I'm her sister." That moment had felt like a line drawn in the sand. Now it felt like the beginning of something else. It was late on a Thursday when the email came through. The subject line read, "Private Client Inquiry. Immediate review requested." I almost skipped it, half expecting it to be another cold pitch, but something about the sender's domain caught my eye. It was a firm I recognized, one of the larger players in private wealth management back east. Not a company we'd worked with, but one whose name had floated across my radar more than once. The body of the message was brief. We've been following Sentinel Shield's progress and are interested in a potential integration. Our CTO is particularly impressed with your adaptive detection framework. Would you be available for an exploratory call? At the bottom was the name James Thornton II. I read it again. Then once more. Heather's father-in-law. I didn't respond right away. I stared at the screen thinking about that wedding reception, about how he'd looked at me when Andrew said my name. It hadn't just been surprise, it had been recognition. I forwarded the email to our head of business development with a short note. Let's prep for this one carefully. I'll take the call myself. The call happened 3 days later. It was direct, professional, efficient. I've been reviewing your platform personally, James said. Frankly, it's impressive. Your predictive model closes gaps our existing systems don't even detect. Appreciate that, I said. We've worked hard to keep innovation ahead of the curve. He didn't mention Heather, or Andrew, or the wedding, not once. But near the end of the call, he said I'd like to schedule an in-person meeting next month. I think you'd find our strategic direction compatible with your long-term vision. I agreed to the meeting, but I kept a mental note of the subtext. A week after that call, I received a message on LinkedIn from someone I hadn't spoken to since high school. A woman named Paige, who used to be one of Heather's friends, one of the ones who laughed behind their hands at the girl in glasses and hand-me-down dresses. Saw your feature in tech and security. Incredible what you've built. Funny, I still remember you tinkering in the back row of Mrs. Larson's class. I guess you were always ahead of us. Congrats on all the success. It was short, polite, maybe even sincere. But the phrase that stood out wasn't the compliment. It was, I guess you were always ahead of us. Not, I'm sorry, not, we were wrong. Just a quiet acknowledgement that the story had changed. I closed the message and set my phone aside. Later that week, Jordan and I went to dinner at a small place we liked tucked between two bookstores off 6th Avenue. It was raining steady and light, and the windows fogged up as we waited for our food. You've been quiet this week, he said, sipping his tea. Just thinking, I said. About Heather, I nodded. And about everything that's come after. He watched me for a moment, then said, You've come a long way, but I know it doesn't erase what it took to get here. I looked at him grateful not for the words, but for the way he never tried to fix the things that didn't need fixing. That night back home, I pulled out a notebook I hadn't touched in years. It had my old project sketches in it, network maps, early drafts of my threat detection model notes from late-night brainstorms when I was living on ramen and noise-canceling headphones. Tucked into the back cover was the folded note I'd left on my parents' kitchen counter all those years ago. I'm leaving to become someone you'll regret dismissing. I held it for a long time before sliding it back in. I wasn't angry anymore, not really, but something inside me was still reaching for closure. A week later, I booked a flight to Connecticut. Not to visit my parents. Not yet. Instead, I scheduled a speaking engagement at my old high school. The computer science teacher, Mr. Dorsey, had retired, but the new department head welcomed me without hesitation. I can't believe you're coming back here, she said over the phone. You have no idea what this will mean to our students. I walked through those halls the morning of the event, passing the lockers where I used to linger between classes, head down backpack straps digging into my shoulders. The walls hadn't changed much, same beige paint, same blue trim, but I felt different in them, steadier. The auditorium filled slowly, students, faculty, a few curious parents. I stepped onto the stage and adjusted the mic. I'm Rachel Morgan. I began founder and CEO of Sentinel Shield. But before all that, I was a girl in room 214 who loved algorithms more than prom dresses. There was a soft ripple of laughter. It was enough. I told them about building something from the ground up, about the early failures, about the doubts I'd carried long after leaving this town behind. I told them about how some of the most important people in my life weren't the ones I started with, but the ones I met when I stopped trying to fit where I didn't belong. Afterward, a student approached me, maybe 15 or 16 glasses, and a backpack too heavy for her frame. "My parents don't really get why I love robotics," she said. "But hearing you talk, it makes me feel like I'm not weird for wanting to build something on my own." I handed her my card. "You're not weird. You're early." That evening, Jordan met me at the hotel. "How did it go?" he asked. "Good," I said. It felt right. As I kicked off my shoes and sank into the armchair, my phone buzzed. It was Heather. "Are you still in town?" I was hoping we could talk, in person. I stared at the message for a moment, then replied, "Tomorrow afternoon, somewhere quiet." The coffee shop was just as I remembered, small, a little drafty near the window, and still using mismatched mugs for their lattes. Heather sat at a table near the back, turning a paper cup slowly between her palms. She looked up as I walked in, stood then sat back down when I gave a small nod instead of a hug. "Thanks for meeting me," she said. I pulled out the chair across from her and set my phone face down on the table. "You said you wanted to talk." She nodded. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this. For weeks." I waited. "I was wrong," she said finally. "About you. About everything." Her voice didn't waver, but I could see how tightly her fingers clutched the sleeve of her sweater. There was no makeup this time, no performance. I grew up thinking I had to be the version of myself that kept everyone comfortable, she went on. And part of that meant pretending you didn't matter, that you leaving was your choice. Easier to frame it that way than admit what we did. I looked down at the cup in front of me. The lid had a small crack in it. "I used to think you didn't want to be part of the family," she said. "But I see now you were never given a place in it." Her voice caught. "Andrew and I, he's been patient, but after the wedding, he pushed me to face things I hadn't wanted to admit. We're in counseling, together, and separately." I didn't speak right away. The espresso machine hissed behind us, followed by the soft clatter of mugs being stacked. "I know it doesn't change what happened," she said, "but I want to be someone different moving forward, someone better. I don't want to keep pretending the past didn't happen." She reached into her bag and took out a thin envelope. "I found this when I was packing up some things at Mom and Dad's. It was in a drawer in the study." I opened the envelope and slid out the note I'd written the night I left. The paper was creased and faded around the edges, but the handwriting was unmistakably mine, going to become someone you'll regret dismissing. "I didn't know they kept it," I said quietly. "They didn't," she replied. "They never talked about it. It was buried, like everything else." We sat there for a long while, the space between us quiet, but not tense. Just open. Heather glanced up. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you come to the wedding? Really?" I leaned back in my chair. "Because I needed to see it through. Not to get revenge. Not to disrupt anything. Just to be there, as myself, so that part of my story could end." She nodded slowly. "It did. But it started something too. For me, at least." I gave a small nod in return. "For me, too." After we left the cafe, we walked along Main Street for a few blocks. She told me she was thinking of stepping away from some of the charity boards she joined out of obligation. "I don't know what I want yet," she said, "but I know I don't want a life that's just about being impressive." We reached the corner where our paths split. She turned to face me. "Would it be okay if I called sometimes, not to fix anything, just to talk?" "I think that would be fine," I said. We said goodbye without any promises, but something between us felt repaired, not erased, just steadied. Back in Seattle, things picked up quickly. Sentinel Shield was in the final phase of beta testing for a new platform, and we'd just secured a major contract with a European finance group. The work was demanding, but it felt different now, less like I was proving something, and more like I was building something that stood on its own. One evening, Jordan and I were sitting on the balcony, the sun low over the Sound. He had his arm draped behind me, quiet. "How'd it feel seeing her again?" he asked. I thought for a moment, like we were both trying to learn how to be honest. He nodded. "That's something." I leaned my head against his shoulder. "You've done a lot of heavy lifting," he said, "with your family, with the past." "I know." He turned toward me. "So what do you want now, just for you?" I looked out over the city, the lights starting to flicker on in the buildings below. I think I want to give someone else the kind of chance I needed back then. The next morning, I met with our legal team to finalize the launch of the Sentinel Shield Mentorship Program, a companion to the Eleanor Morgan Foundation. Not just money, but relationships, support, someone to answer the call at midnight when a student felt overwhelmed and unsure. A few weeks later, I received a call from Heather. She was visiting Seattle for a conference and asked if we could meet. We chose a quiet restaurant on the waterfront. She arrived looking less polished than usual, in jeans and a cardigan, her hair pulled back simply. Over dinner, she told me she was applying for a graduate program in social work. "I think I want to help people who feel like they never had a voice," she said, "because I used to be part of the problem." I nodded. "I'm not asking you to forget everything," she added. "I just want to be better moving forward." I didn't say yes or no. I just reached across the table and gave her hand a small squeeze. When I got home, I found Jordan waiting on the couch, flipping through a folder of concept art for our next office expansion. "How was it?" he asked. "Different," I said, "but good." He looked up and smiled. I set my purse down and sat beside him, resting my hand over his. It was early spring when my mother called again. I was in my office reviewing a report from our London division when her name appeared on the screen. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Rachel," she said, "your father and I would like to have dinner. Next time you're in Connecticut." Her voice was smooth, practiced. "Familiar." "I don't have a trip planned," I said. "Well, we could come to Seattle," she offered quickly, "or meet somewhere neutral if that's easier." I didn't respond right away. I could hear her breathing on the other end, quiet, expectant. "What's the reason?" I asked. There was a pause. "We want to reconnect," she said. "We've been reading about the foundation, about your company. You've made quite a name." I kept my voice steady. "So this is about what I've accomplished. It's about wanting to move forward, without acknowledging what's behind us." She sighed. "I don't think it helps to dwell on the past." I stood by the window watching the ferry glide across Elliott Bay. "That's the difference," I said. "I'm not dwelling. I'm asking for accountability." "We did what we thought was best," she said softly. "No," I said. "You did what was easiest, for you." She didn't argue, and I didn't offer to meet. That night I told Jordan about the call. He nodded. "Same pattern, same words," I said. "Different tone." I didn't hear from my father directly, but Heather mentioned during one of our calls that he'd been tracking Sentinel Shield's valuation. "He asks questions like he's casually interested," she said, "but I can tell he's paying close attention." That was enough. I didn't need more than that. What mattered to me was what we were building, what came next. The Eleanor Morgan Foundation was entering its second year. Our mentorship program had paired over 30 students with professionals in tech engineering and applied sciences. I received updates regularly, stories from young women navigating school career plans and the slow process of building confidence. One student wrote, "I used to think success was for people who already had it figured out, but then I heard your story, and I realized it's okay to start from the outside. Thank you for making space for people like me." I kept that note on my desk. It reminded me that change didn't always look like an apology. Sometimes it looked like a door being held open for someone who hadn't been invited before. In June, Sentinel Shield was featured in a national business publication. The article focused on innovation leadership and long-term growth. But in the final paragraph, the journalist asked what motivated me most. I told her, creating what I needed when I was younger. That's the work I'll never stop doing. The day the article came out, I got a message from a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to since high school. Someone who used to tag along with Heather and her friends at family gatherings. Saw the article. Just wanted to say you did it. A lot of people back here are talking. In a good way. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Later that summer, we hosted the Foundation's first in-person retreat. 40 students from across the country flew into Seattle for a weekend of workshops, networking, and mentorship. At the closing dinner, I gave a short speech. I want you to remember, I said that your value isn't defined by who recognizes it. Your voice, your ideas, your presence, those things matter. And if anyone tries to make you feel small, let that be your reason to rise. Afterward, one of the students came up to me, quiet, thoughtful. My parents still don't understand why I'm studying computer science, she said. But you made me feel like I belong in that room. I smiled. You do. The next morning, as we packed up the venue, I stood by the window looking out at the water, the sunlight breaking through low gray clouds. Jordan came up beside me, a coffee in each hand. Retreat went well, he said. It did. Your grandmother would be proud. I nodded. I hope so. Back at home that evening, Heather called. She'd just finished a volunteer shift at a community center in Hartford. I've been working with teenage girls, she said. Some of them remind me of you at that age. Smart and overlooked, I asked. She laughed softly. Smart and undersupported. I sat down on the couch. You're doing something meaningful. I'm trying, she said. It's not redemption, but it's something. That night I wrote a letter, not an email, not a message, a letter. I addressed it to my parents. I told them what I'd built and who had helped me along the way. I didn't ask for anything. I didn't criticize, but I included one sentence near the end. I no longer carry the weight of who you didn't see. I've built a life around the people who always did. I didn't know if they'd respond. I didn't expect them to. But I mailed it anyway, because it wasn't about them anymore. It was about closing a loop that had been open for far too long. A few months after I sent the letter, a small envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address, just my name written in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a card with a photo of a lake at sunset. The message was short. We received your letter. Thank you for writing. Mom. No apology, no acknowledgement of what had been lost, but it felt like the closing of a door that had stayed cracked open for far too long. I didn't write back. Instead, I went for a walk along the water with Jordan. The wind was cool, soft, coming off the bay. We didn't talk much, just listened to the sound of our footsteps on the path and the gulls overhead. After a while, I said, I think I'm finally done waiting. Jordan looked over. Waiting for what? For them to change, for them to see me differently. For some moment, that makes everything make sense. He nodded. That moment might never come. I know, I said, and I'm okay with that. There's something about letting go of the past, not as an act of surrender, but as a choice. A choice to stop carrying what was never yours to fix. I'd spent years trying to make sense of the silence, the cold shoulders, the way a whole family could close its eyes to someone who didn't match their reflection. But I'd also spent years building something better, not just a company, not just a foundation, a life, one rooted in honesty and connection in people who saw my worth before I had to prove it. Heather still calls sometimes. She's learning who she is, one step at a time. And though our relationship may never be what some sisters share, it's something real, something earned. My mother and father remain distant, civil when needed, but nothing more. I've made peace with that. You can't change people who don't believe they need changing, but you can change the way their absence defines you. That's what I've done. Some nights when the house is quiet and the workday's behind me, I still think about the girl I used to be, sitting in her childhood bedroom with a laptop and a head full of ideas, wondering if anyone would ever believe in her. I wish I could reach back and tell her what I know now, that she was never too plain, that her voice mattered even when no one was listening, that the people who fail to see your worth don't get to decide it. Because your value isn't something handed to you, it's something you carry with you always, quietly, steadily, like light. And the most powerful thing you'll ever do is live like it's true. If this story reminded you of your own journey of something you had to walk through alone, or a moment when you finally stood tall, feel free to share it in the comments. And if you know someone who needs to hear, they are enough, just as they are, maybe send this along. Thank you for spending time with me. Until next time, take care of your voice and your worth. You never know who's finally ready to hear it.